I've been graced with living a life full of adventure through video game. One thing I've found over the years is that the best adventures are ones you don't know you're on. I understand the hype surrounding the release of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, but I don't think gamers truly understand what they're getting here. A developer needs to understand inspiration, but also know how to tie that back into their own means of storytelling, culture, and gameplay system. Clair Obscur, from beginning to end, is unapologetically frank. The game is both familiar and yet completely unique, thanks to its narrative pacing and combat systems. While I have a lot to say about the game, if you were at all hesitant about Clair Obscur Expedition 33, don't be. It's one of the greatest adventures I've been on, comparable to any mainline Final Fantasy release. But like any Final Fantasy, some elements may divide the player base. Like any good piece of French theater, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a tragedy. You begin the game in the city of Lumiere, where you meet Gustave and his adopted sister Maëlle. The number 34 is written on a mountain in the distance, which currently holds the focus of the entire city covered in rose petals. The truth of this number comes to light relatively quickly as it fades to reveal a 33, and with it, any person of that age disappears. This is the reality of the citizens of Lumiere. A curse threatens their existence as a distant enemy known as the Paintress kills an entire age group each year. However, Gustave, Maëlle, and others have put their time into training as expeditioners fated to sail over to the Paintress Island each year in hopes of taking her down. Many years and many expeditions have failed before. But Gustave, a man with very little left to fight for in Lumiere, is hoping to spend his final days attempting to end the curse. Others have come before him and others plan to go after, but hope quickly fades as they arrive on the island, met by a mysterious man who attacks the entire expedition unprovoked. Gustave sits at a crossroad, willing to end it all for just a moment of relief from the nightmare that he's found himself in. Luckily for him, his friend Loon survived the attack, and along as a lead, Gustave is pretty unique. He's got some demons, but he relies heavily on Maëlle and the others around him to point him in the right direction. Given this is an RPG, I don't want to spoil anything about your experience with these characters. What I can say is that I was initially worried about some of the late game characters who joined, such as Seal or Monaco. I just didn't really understand their inclusion when they first joined the group, other than a new party member for combat. However, that changes as campsites become more important in the later hours, and bonding events unlock conversations between Gustave and the others that highlight them. I should mention though that this system in particular is pretty bare bones and almost unnecessary due to the events not really being restricted by anything other than progress in the game. This does waste time during moments when you arrive at camp and have to talk to each person and see if they have a bonding event available. For this system to feel natural in the game flow, I think it should be restricted to one bonding event per night, or show an indicator above a character's head to let you know they have an event available. The restricted suggestion wouldn't work in the current version of the game because camping can be done at any time. I'm just throwing out suggestions as feedback. There is also the character Verso and Renoir, who shock the group by being old. Renoir isn't really a nice man, but his resolve ultimately makes me pity him. He carries a burden that he created on his shoulders and seems to blame everyone else for it. Verso and Gustave share a few similarities, both being absolute husband zeros on the battlefield, but they are both very different characters. In that same breath, I think it would have served the narrative better to show Gustave interacting more with the late game characters, which brings me to say that there are a few elements of this adventure that will completely divide players when it comes to the pacing and key event. That can likely be said of any RPG, but this game has some Final Fantasy VII Remake levels of mind games. I personally loved it, but again, I think there should have been more screen time with Gustave and Verso, where their first interaction could have really set up a nice buildup of drama. Regardless, the twists and realizations made on this expedition will be discussed within gaming circles for years to come. Honestly, I feel like only a French team could pull this story off. It's both romantic and nightmarish in every moment. There's so much beauty in this destruction, and the camera will linger on uncomfortable moments long enough for you to process the situation, live with it, and then find a path forward. I was brought to tears on numerous occasions. Within a few hours, it's tough not to feel like a member of this expedition, and I want to say that's all by design. The narrative isn't afraid to reveal its hand before the climax because it knows you aren't prepared for what it's about to throw at you. I would love to talk for hours about these characters and their interactions, but I'll leave it for now and cap it off with I love these characters. So let's get into the combat. When first arriving on the island, you'll go through some tutorials, but this act of encountering new enemy types and essentially learning how they fight is constant. The basics are that when it's your turn, you have a few attack options. You can exhaust AP with aim, which can sometimes be used to show an enemy weak point. You can use an item, which are limited and only replenished at rest spots. There are skills which consume AP and attack which doesn't consume AP, and depending on the equipped weapon, may have some elemental advantage. When it comes to skill attacks, players will be met with a quick time event. This can be turned off in the settings, but I kept it on for the entirety of my playthrough. I also played through the game in expedition mode, which is the default setting, but we'll delve into that later. Now, enemy attacks are what will take the most understanding. The only way you're going to get through this game is by being an enemy attack reading expert. The primary system here is the ability to dodge or parry most attacks. These essentially do the same thing, but parries have a smaller window and allow for a follow-up attack if successful. Later in the game, you'll gain access to a jump action to avoid specific attacks and even a new type of dodge that avoids powerful enemy attacks in the late game. This evolution definitely keeps things interesting in the second half of the expedition because you also unlock a new special attack which can act as a second action. These special attacks, which I don't want to spoil, are unique to each character and can be learned through progressing the bonding event. The combat is entirely skill-based. You will die a lot, even in grunt enemy encounters, but there's a very nice autosave system. While you can flee from battles, it does take a turn. There's no option to just press start and leave the fight, which I actually like. You're essentially forced to get good or die trying. I assure you that if you don't believe in your skills to block these attacks, you won't get far. I will say though that the story mode difficulty, which can be changed at any time, alleviates this by lowering the stats of enemies dramatically, giving you ample time to learn enemy attack patterns, which consistently change as new enemy types are introduced. I tried a few battles with story mode difficulty and I wasn't having fun personally. Even though I won fights quickly and didn't have to block or dodge anything, I didn't feel rewarded. I'm actually glad about this because it means that players of any skill type could likely see the credits of this game, and that's what's most important. That said, I played this game for 10 hours one day and was still invested in the combat. I can't begin to tell you all the games that I end up chessing through in the late hours because the grunt fights get stale. Perhaps it's the required player attention in battles that elevates combat exhaustion because I can't remember a moment when I wasn't having fun. That said, combat strategy can shift rapidly. You may have a go-to combo where I personally relied on Gustav's charges and Seal Dark attacks, but small mistakes in the setup or taking damage will force you to create an alternate approach. If your main party falls, you do have the option to bring in the other members of your team as backup, which I thought was cool. Stats from levels end up playing a much larger role in the late game as they directly correlate with your equipped weapon. It doesn't really matter where you put your stats at the beginning of the game because you get these items that allow you to reset the character stat. And when it comes to raw stats, you're free to put all your points in attack and HP, but later in the game, you'll notice your team attacks less and less often. Further, it doesn't really matter how powerful you are because for most of the game, you're locked at 9,999 damage per attack, so give some love to agility and luck, you'll have an easier time. The equipped weapon also provides some stat increases, so if you have a level 20 weapon you love, you can reset the stats with the added benefits of the equipped weapon in mind. Cool system that doesn't reveal itself until much later. Skills can also be learned, but they come at a slower pace. Each character has unique strategic depths, such as Mael relying on stances for extra damage or defense, or Skill, who can throw cards, and depending on the suit of the card can stack huge amounts of damage if played right. It's a really fun system that mirrors deck builders in terms of using turns to set up later strategies and hoping no one foils your plan. There's also Pictos, which can be learned permanently and equipped depending on the luminas you have access to. This system is very confusing. I didn't know until 20 hours in what luminas even were, but basically you can equip 3 Pictos to a character, which adds some stat benefit. While it's equipped, it'll level up and be learnable by the entire cast. You'll need enough luminas to equip it permanently, but by the time I figured it out, I already had a nice pool of them. And this brings me to the most lacking part of this entire experience, the menuing. If there is one negative aspect of this game, it's the lack of cohesive menus and quality of life extras that many players will eventually expect. Currently, every menu outside of battles looks like a bunch of random clickable boxes on a black screen. Navigating from equipment to Pictos to Luminia is confusing and unintuitive. It's the only damper on the game outside of how you can't place map markers on the world map to help. Trust me, once you unlock Eski's flying ability, you're going to want it. There are a lot of secret areas you'll want to explore in the end game, but remembering where everything isn't easy. Regardless, exploration will have you forgetting about those menus in no time because this team knows how to design dungeons. Every area left some impact on me as the team seemed to understand that there had to be at least 2 landmarks in every place players visited. They stand out in my memory so vividly, but I'd say my favorite dungeon is the one that houses the dancing enemy. It's designed as an area, and when you get to that stage, you'll know why. Interestingly, anytime you go off the beaten path, you'll be rewarded or punished, given that many routes lead to secret bosses, but if you beat them, you'll get some pretty cool items. Some areas on the world map are simply one screen with a static camera and an item. These areas are interesting given that they could have been their own dungeon, but instead they now act as a moment of silence for the player to rest while taking in the atmosphere of the scenes. I would have liked if the developers allowed players to trigger a special event between the cast in these areas, much like in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where you can trigger bonding events. You can also find secret mini-games around the map that unlock bathing suits for the cast. Optional clothing is cool, and the threads do appear in the cutscenes, but this can be turned off. Anyway, damn, all these characters, even you, Monoko, are double-cheeked up. More costumes besides bathing suits can be unlocked through optional quests and purchasable hairstyles, but I will say though that Mael gets the best optional costumes of the group. Sound design is also an important factor, given that enemy telegraphs have visual and audio cues of when to dodge. The music is dynamic in battles as it rises and falls with the pace of battles. I'm thinking about the last boss score now, and it's tough not to want to hear it again. There are some good tracks here, and I've been listening to Clair Obscur for days on end while I clean my house. This quality is also seen in the voice cast. Jennifer English absolutely steals the show here, as her performance of Mael is one that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. She really put in the effort to depict the struggles and confusion that the character goes through. Clair Obscur is a genuine standout RPG driven by courage, sacrifice, and the powerful bonds formed in the midst of tragedy. It pushes you to confront loss and hope in equal measure, resonating long after the credits roll. This is a beautifully tragic expedition that demands your emotional investment, repaying it with a story and characters that will reward the time it takes to develop the skills of not taking any damage in combat. This may be a divisive game within the community due to its skill-based combat system and a few questionable choices with the direction of the story. But all I can tell you is that this is one tragedy you're going to want to see through.